A quick reminder that today's session is being recorded. Please note that at any time during today's session, you are free to utilize the question and answer feature that is located at the bottom of your screen. A few reminders when utilizing that feature is please do not share any personal information. You have the option to submit questions anonymously, and we will address as many questions as we can, not only as part of our live Q&A towards the end of today's session, but also on the back end as we have staff who are prepared to answer questions throughout today's entire session. So again, please feel free at any time today to utilize that feature. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening from wherever you may be joining us for today's Trying Family Web Series session, Home Away from Home, Navigating Student Housing for Next Year. My name is Dan Perez. I'm the Associate Director for the Office of Parent and Family Programs, the office that gets to present this session in partnership with Housing, Dining, and Hospitality and Student Legal Services. And we know that even though we were only in the winter quarter, that is only February, that there are lots of important dates and things to know for students planning to live either on campus or off campus for already the 2025-2026 academic year. So this session includes so much good information, recommendations, and support services to help you and your student navigate their living situation for the next academic year. And with that, we have two great presenters, and I will hand it over to our first presenter, Malia Mahi, the Associate Director from Housing and Administration.
Thanks, Dan. Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Malia Mahi. I am the Associate Director for the Housing Administrative Services team here at UC San Diego. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I've been with UC San Diego working in housing my whole time for almost 16 years. I want to share with you that I'm also the mother of a second-year college student who's going into their third year. For the college that my student attends, they also do not have a housing guarantee. So we've been holding some of these same discussions with our student about how they want to proceed with their housing for next year. If your student is like mine, sometimes it's hard to get a definitive date or an actual answer from them as far as what they're thinking. So today, I hope that this information helps you start or continue those conversations with your student and also gives you that information that you're going to need to help support them in their housing decision for the 2025-26 academic year. It seems crazy that we're talking about it already, but here we go. Next slide. So first, I just want to make sure that our parents and supporters here today understand that we do offer a two-year housing guarantee for UC San Diego students in their admit years. So students that were admitted in fall of 2024, so it would have been in September of 2024, both for our first year students and our transfers, they are eligible or they were eligible for that two-year housing guarantee. A couple of things needed to happen for them to be able to take advantage of that guarantee. First, they needed to live on campus with us for the 2024-25 academic year. And they also need to complete the full term of their housing contract in order to maintain that eligibility for the guarantee. We do not make our campus housing mandatory. It is totally optional for students, but I just wanted you all to understand how that guarantee for 2 years works for your student. Next slide. So we're looking now at what's going to be happening for the 25-26 academic year. There's a couple of categories that your student might fall into. The first rule of thumb is really to make sure that they meet all these deadlines. It's really important because if you don't, it's basically forfeiting that housing guarantee. And if I was a parent, I'd be asking, like, how does my student reserve their spot? And I want to make sure that you know there's a few options based on your student's status. And if you don't know your student's status, I recommend that you reach out to them to confirm what information they've received from us. We sent out emails on February 3rd, providing students with their status, whether they have a housing guarantee or not, and what those options are going to be for them. We also plan on sending at least 3 more reminders to them. So it's really important if you can have that conversation with them. Keep an eye on that ucsd.edu email. That's where all our reminders and our information is going to go to. So as far as your students' categories, you might have a student who has the housing guarantee. They're going to go through a process which we call room selection. And this process takes place annually, usually February and March, in order for them to secure housing for the following academic year. We may have students that don't have a housing guarantee. So maybe this is their second year and that they don't have one for their third year. So students who are currently living on campus can sign up for what we call the room selection interest list. And that goes all the way from February 20th to March 11th. It's basically them saying, yes, I'm interested. If you have a space for me, here's what I'm kind of looking for. And then if we see that we have availability, we can make offers to them. If a student misses a deadline anywhere along these processes, whether they have the guarantee or they don't, we always have our waitlist, and the fall waitlist opens in mid-July. And we do have a slide about this at the end of our presentation that can share more about that housing waitlist process. There are a few steps here for our students with the guarantee. So step one is for them to complete what we call the continuing student housing application or the room selection application. And that's going to open February 20th and goes all the way to February 26th. So anytime during the 20th to the 26th, up to 11:59 p.m., they're able to submit that applications. If your student doesn't have that guarantee, they can still sign up again for the room selection interest list. And that's a longer period because, again, we're going to be looking at how many students completed the original room selection application and how many spots you may still have open. So if your student doesn't have a guarantee, they can sign up for the interest list starting February 20th all the way to March 11th. For our students who complete their application process through the room selection application, they're going to go ahead and sign a housing contract and submit their housing prepayment of $450. The housing contract process is going to go from March 5th to the 11th. Again, I just want to emphasize that they don't want to miss any deadlines. Otherwise, that is a forfeit of their guarantee, and they'll be asked to sign up on the wait list when it opens in mid-July. We're dropping some links in the chat. So I definitely want to recommend as parents and families attending to bookmark the deadlines and details page as well as our room selection page. The room selection page continually gets updated with more information. And then again, I just want to go through the housing eligibility to ensure that they maintain that guarantee. So again, meeting all those deadlines, living on campus for this year and completing the full term of their contract, meaning they didn't cancel or terminate. We do require that students are registered full time, which is defined as 12 units. They also need to make sure that they don't have any outstanding account balances that are past due. And then, of course, maintaining compliance with all of our university deadlines and policies. Next slide. This is just a snapshot of that deadlines and details page. So you can see there's a lot of dates on here. And again, I just want to acknowledge that our students are still, learning how to adults, learning how to manage their time. I'm still doing it too here in my 50s. So any help that you can provide them, these are great pages for you to reference, maybe take a snapshot of it and text it to them to make sure they know where to find everything. But anything you can do to support your student is helpful to us as well. I recommend also if you want to set reminders for yourself or your student to check in where they're at in the process and making sure that they know when the deadlines are coming up. And if you find your student confused or frustrated at any time, we actually are here in person. We're open Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., excluding our university holidays. Your student can come in person to our office, they can call us, or they can email us for help. Next slide. I just wanted to remind everybody that our housing package essentially also includes our flexible dining plans. And those are designed as an a la carte system. So basically, your student gets all the money up front from the dining plan, and then they decide where, when, and how they want to eat and drink out of all of our dining facilities. And for our first year ever, we've also included Triton Cash, which allows them to eat at vendors both on campus and off campus. We have within our housing and dining hospitality group over 15 dining and market locations on campus. If you're looking for the cost at this point, those have not been vetted or approved by our undergraduate advisory committee, but we do plan on having all those costs updated prior to the contract process that's going to begin on March 5th. So you can keep checking back onto our rates and charges page just to see what those costs are going to be. I believe the estimate is anywhere from 5 to 6% more than they were for this year. We do also recommend when your student is considering what kind of dining plan to select, we recommend maybe selecting the lowest plan that they have access to, because as a parent and supporter, you can always add more money to their plan. They can always upgrade if they want to, but you can't drop it down. So our recommendation is to go with the lowest plan. And then if they ever need more money, they can pivot to add more money to the dining plan, more Triton Cash, whatever your student is looking for. And then your students have opportunities to always change that dining plan selection. So during the contract process, they're going to be asked to pick a plan. And that's the plan for the housing locations that they can be assigned to. So they'll have different options. They'll see a drop down menu. But throughout August, September, and October, they have the opportunity to go back in and kind of right size that plan. The last day for your student to change their dining plan for the 2025-26 year is going to be October 1st of 2025. Next slide, please. And then as far as roommate and apartment mate selection, this comes up a lot for our students. So they can pick roommates or suite mates. However, they have to be within the same college of registration in order to what we call create these roommate groups. They also have to identify with the same gender marker in order to live together, unless they've opted into a gender inclusive housing location. They are limited into how many people they can include in their roommate group. So it is limited to the number of bedrooms within the apartment or suite. So for example, if the space that they're looking at is 6 bedrooms, the total amount of roommates in a group would be 6, including the roommate lead, who is going to be the person in charge of picking and assigning spaces for everybody in their group. You don't have to have a roommate or apartment mate. You can totally participate through room selection as an individual. However, it's really important that your student understands if they have a roommate group and they've picked someone to be the lead, typically they're going to want to pick someone with the earliest lottery time and dates, because they'll be more in the inventory at that point. If you've given your PIN to another student, you're basically providing them consent to pick a space for you. So it's also really important to talk about to your student about if they are going to be in a roommate group, who the lead person is, that they've ensured that they've talked about like what they're going to be comfortable living in and what they wouldn't be comfortable living in. We recommend looking at any kind of space plans that they have available to them and having up to 4 plans. The best plan, of course, would be everyone's in the same apartment or suite. The second would be maybe they're scattered throughout different bedrooms. The third might be same floor. The fourth might be same building. So they do have to think about different scenarios and have a plan for each of those scenarios. Next slide, please. And so for undergraduate housing waitlist, this again is available to, it's really available to any students. But if they've missed a deadline, that's where we're going to let them know would be their next opportunity, their next option for campus housing. They would go ahead and sign what we call waitlist application, and they can indicate what type of space and facility they're interested in. It's important if they're really in need of housing to be as generic as possible. So if you're just saying I only want a single apartment, you may not get an offer if we don't have a single an apartment available to them. If they are open, we ask them to pick any housing, any location, and that's the best bet for them to get an offer. Students do need to remember to update their information and keep it current. And then I just wanted to say, because sometimes we get calls, okay, well, what's their chance of getting in the wait list? Again, I've been here for 3 years. Each year we have made our way completely through our wait list for fall. meaning we've made an offer to the students, and we start making offers no matter what they say they want, just to make sure that we said, okay, hey, we have a space if you want it. It's not going to be a single apartment, but we have something for you. And then it's up to them to consider and accept the offer or not. So the wait list is always a good option. First, if you're not sure what the plans are going to be. Second, if there is a deadline missed and they still want housing. And third, it doesn't cost anything, so it doesn't hurt to add yourself to the wait list. Next slide. And last but not least, planning ahead, getting ahead essentially. So we do have summer options available for students as well. I just want to make sure our parents and supporters are aware of that. So we have 2 programs available. Summer classes are a great option to get ahead on your credits, potentially catch up on missed class, maybe a bad grade that they might have gotten, or of course to spend a beautiful summer here in San Diego while attending classes. So Accelerate is the program that's designed for students that are currently living in our housing this year. So they mean they would still be here during the spring quarter, and they do need to be enrolled in their UC San Diego summer session classes. The other program we have is what we call traditional. And that kind of is like a catch-all for a whole bunch of different student types, new incoming students, transfer students and freshmen, new incoming international students, continuing students that are maybe living off campus and want to come onto campus for summer, visiting students who might be here for UC San Diego classes. And so they can enroll in that traditional housing program. Again, students do have to be enrolled in summer session to be eligible. And then our website should be updated mid-March with information about the cost and the programs available to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Malia. Our partners over with the off-campus housing office could not be here to join us today, so they did send some information that I'm able to review quickly, and we'll have more information when we send out this PowerPoint presentation tomorrow to everyone who registered for today's session, along with the recording of today's session. So just some brief overviews that UC San Diego does have an off-campus housing office that resides in the Basic Needs Hub, and they provide an off-campus housing website, recommendations on how to search for off-campus housing, services and support in recommendations on how to search for roommates, a lot of information for first-time renters, and they do host off-campus housing events for not just properties that come onto campus that will have vacancies, but also for students to mingle with each other and maybe find potential roommates. Again, a lot more of this information will be included in the PowerPoint deck that goes out tomorrow. But again, to visit the off-campus housing website, a student will need to use their UCSD user login, and they'll be able to create a personal account, view rentals, and access a roommate search. So they'll be able to really look through year-long rentals, subleases, roommate listings, and more. And those listings that are a part of the off-campus housing website are all vetted by the off-campus housing office. Again, they can access it. It looks like this. That QR code should take folks to the off-campus housing website. But again, this information will be included in an email follow-up tomorrow to all those that registered. And lastly, as the off-campus housing office resides in the Basic Needs Hub, the Hub Basic Needs Center also provides other services for students. So just an FYI that they also house the Trying Food Pantry. They have a personal hygiene program to provide materials for students in need, housing consultation, emergency housing support services. And again, they will be having off-campus housing mitzers and a fair later in the spring quarter. And with that, I'd like to introduce Giancarlo Senor, who will be able to speak on the legal aspects of students renting off-campus housing.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Yes, hi everybody. I'm John Carlos Sr. I'm an attorney and I'm the director at Student Legal Services. My office provides free, confidential counseling, education, and referrals to all currently registered UCSD students. So as long as your students are registered at UC San Diego, they have a free lawyer. In fact, 2 free lawyers to come talk to you about any legal issues, questions, or problems that they might have. And I do need to thank the parents and guardians out there who have been wonderful, encouraging your students to come to our office to talk to us, whether it's about off-campus housing and issues with roommates or landlords or security deposits or repairs, or really any other legal questions or issues. So as I said, we're free and we're confidential, and we're located in the Student Services Center, right across from the Price Center, which you see there in the background of that picture. I know that the vast majority of interest and information in this workshop is about on-campus housing, but I do want to provide just a little bit of information about off-campus housing, particularly because, of course, there are going to be folks that are going to be living off campus. A majority, although that majority is decreasing every year as we get our on-campus population as it continues to grow. In any case, I really want to emphasize a few things for folks who are going to live off campus. So if you go to the next slide, please, you'll see that a lot of what I'm really sort of focusing on is with respect to scams and with living with other folks. So a few renting tips. Number one, yes, absolutely watch out for scams. I always encourage students, don't send any money, don't send a deposit of any type until they've actually seen the place. This is obviously very tricky for folks who haven't been to San Diego before and don't necessarily have somebody local. But if it's at all possible, I really strongly encourage it. There are plenty, unfortunately, of scam websites and emails and listings. So it's really important to do everything that a student can to verify that the listing is real and that it's something that they can trust will be available. So unfortunately, we have students lose lots and lots of money sending out deposits for non-existent residences. So be very careful about scams. Number two, I really want to point out as well with students who are going to have roommates, which of course is going to be the majority of students living off campus, that all tenants, all roommates are jointly and severally liable. In other words, each tenant can be held legally responsible for what up to 100% of the obligations under a lease if everybody's signing on to the same lease, which most landlords are going to insist tenants do. What that means is if say your child, your student has paid their share of the rent, but their roommate has not, not only can that roommate be held legally liable and for missing their share of the rent, but so can yours. The same rule applies when it comes to security deposits. If a roommate trashes their room, their private bedroom at a location, it's going to come out of the joint security deposit. So I really want to emphasize to folks that if at all possible, students should get to know the people they're going to be living with. We've all got our rules when it comes to, living and cleanliness and who's doing the dishes and noise and overnight guests and all those sorts of things. So I think it's really important for students to have a conversation with one another but before they agree to live together, because they really are entering into a binding contract that's absolutely enforceable in most all circumstances. And that's one of the reasons why I encourage students to consider using a roommate agreement, which you can find a link to at our Student Legal Services website. If you go to sample forms and agreements, you'll see a roommate agreement. It's customizable, where you can kind of lay out what the understanding is between the students. And thank you, Margot, for dropping the link to that in the chat. So as I said, you can kind of put whatever you want in that. It's not going to change the joint and several liability issue, but at least it's going to clarify, again, the sort of understandings, between roommates. And the same rule applies. This joint and several liability applies when it comes to co-signers and guarantors. Co-signer, guarantor, by the way, that basically means the same thing. A co-signer is typically a parent or guardian who agrees to sign on to be financially liable for the place if anything should come up. And because of this joint and several liability, typically a co-signer is going to be agreeing to be financially responsible, again, not just for their student, but every roommate, every person that's living there. So it's really important for you all in particular, and I really do appreciate this opportunity to talk to you, to parents and guardians out there in particular, because I do want you to be aware of the pretty significant, legal financial liability that you're taking on if you're agreeing to be a co-signer. Now, unfortunately, obviously it's the landlord's right to insist on that, and a lot of times they're going to require that students be able to prove, that they have an income twice that of the monthly rent. And of course, most students absolutely do not have that capacity. Although, by the way, they can use financial aid statements and scholarships and that sort of a thing. But it's in those situations where a landlord might insist on there being a cosigner or guarantor. And so if that's the reality, and if you're comfortable with it, that's fine. But just understand, again, the responsibility that you're taking on with that. And kind of hand in hand with that is the issue, as far as I'm concerned, of renters insurance. More and more, I'm seeing leases where landlords are requiring that students get that renters insurance when they live off campus, but not everyone. And frankly, a lot of times it's a minimum amount. It's enough to cover the landlord for liability, but not necessarily good enough that it's going to really protect students in case things occur at the place. There are different types of coverages that insurance companies offer. There's personal property insurance, which covers loss, theft, or damage to an individual's property, which basically, a tenant can analyze, what they have at the place and decide, okay, I've got $20,000 worth of stuff, so that's how much coverage I want, or 15 or 25,000. That amount the cost varies, of course, depending upon how much coverage. Same with liability coverage, which essentially helps protects tenants when, say, somebody gets injured on the property. That also is very important to get. That a lot of times landlords are going to require. And then there's also the last one mentioned. There's loss of use coverage, which is essentially coverage that's provided if something catastrophic happens, if a place floods and they have to, replace the floor, and so people have to move out temporarily. That loss of use coverage will essentially pay for the alternative temporary housing while, fixes are being made. It's very rare that it's needed, but my office hears from several groups of students every year, and so hopefully it's not yours. Hopefully it won't happen, but I generally expect that at least a few groups of students, it'll happen to them. So I always encourage getting loss of use coverage, which usually the coverage is $3,000 or $5,000. All of that added up, by the way, typically we're talking about $15 to $20 a month in renters insurance costs. I don't have a particular company that I recommend, but of course, if you parents or guardians happen to own your homes, you might want to talk to your insurance agents to see about adding coverage for your student. They, of course, also insurance companies will bundle policies and offer discounts to folks who might have an auto insurance as well as say a renter's insurance policy. So I always say get the best insurance you can afford. I really, really strongly recommend that. Again, particularly because of the joint and several liability, that'll protect you in case anything happens, which unfortunately things happen. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the biggest issues that we see is security deposits. So the amount of money that students pay at the beginning of a lease that the landlord is supposed to hold on to until the end of the lease and then return at the end of the lease. And then, of course, potentially make deductions depending upon whether cleaning is needed, whether repairs are needed, that sort of a thing. For a long time, this was the single biggest issue that we saw at Student Legal Services, and it still certainly comes up in the summer when most students' leases expire, in June and July. So I always encourage students before they move into a place to take lots and lots of pictures of the residents before they move a single stick of furniture in, and then to do the same thing when they move out so that they can document the condition of the place. You know, their responsibility as tenants is to leave the place as they found it. In other words, to return it in as good condition upon move out as they found it upon move in. And of course, that can be 6 months, a year, 2 years, several years later. And so it's really important for students to document the condition of the place because, again, their responsibility is to leave it as they found it. And unfortunately, a lot of times landlords will try to charge students for damage that pre-exists the move-in, as well as if a place isn't clean, the responsibility is to return it in the same clean condition as it was found, minus normal wear and tear. So again, documenting the condition of the places by taking pictures is the best way to do it. You can also your student can also fill out an inspection checklist. You can find one on our homepage at sls.ucsd.edu. A lot of times, landlords, particularly at bigger apartment complexes, will actually provide one, but basically has columns where folks can fill out, the condition of the place when they move in. And then there's also then there are two other columns that can be filled out when the tenants move out. And one column is sort of the final inspection that the landlord fills out, and there's one in the middle that's for what the law calls an initial inspection. I prefer to call it the pre-move out inspection because that to me makes a little more sense. But there's essentially tenants have the right to a pre-move out inspection within the final 2 weeks before they move out. And it's really important for your student to do that in order, again, to protect their security deposit. For one thing, it gives the students notice that this is what the landlord's going to charge if these things don't get addressed. The other thing is that it locks down essentially what a landlord can charge for. So in other words, a landlord can't add additional things if the initial inspection occurs and say 3 issues are noted on that initial inspection. They can't subsequently add a 4th or a 5th. So again, I always encourage students to make sure to request and to do that pre-move out inspection. And then lastly, throughout the course of the lease, I always recommend that students make sure that they have put everything in writing. And even if it's an emergency where a phone call or a text is needed, to follow it up with a letter just saying, hey, this is just confirming that this is what happened today. Again, my office, Student Legal Services, we can help students with any legal issues or questions. And so certainly one of the things that we're happy to do, particularly in the spring and summer, is if any student comes to us with a new lease that they would like to go over with us to discuss, to make sure that they understand the terms that they're agreeing to, that is absolutely something that we're happy to do. So that's one of the things that we can provide. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it back to Dan and to any questions that anybody has, not obviously just for me, but for anybody else here.
Yeah, thank you, John Carlos. If I can ask for Malia to pop back on screen and we can go through. Thank you all for utilizing the question and answer feature so efficiently. We've got lots of questions. We're going to try and move through both live here and on the back end. So our first question I wanted to throw out to Malia is, can a student choose which housing apartment they would like to live in if they have a housing guarantee? Or can they stay in the same housing, I'm assuming building, as they have previously been in for the previous academic year? So can they choose the specific housing that they want to live in for next year? And would they be able to choose the same building?
Yes. So the answer is yes. In theory, yes. So the room selection process is way different than when your student came in as a new admit. As a new admit, they're filling out an application, a contract for a space essentially. And then we have a separate team called housing allocations that looks at the gender marker, their personal history form. They'll say like, I like to stay up late, I like to clean. And we actually have a computer program that assigns them to a space. So, like an AI situation essentially says, you say you're female and that you like to stay up late, and this is the college of registration you're in. So we're putting you in this space. And it matches about 80% of what the students ask for. In this situation, as a continuing student, they actually have the power to pick their own space. So in theory, yes, you could probably pick the same building that you're in, but some people might get in earlier than you. It's a random lottery date and time that you're assigned. Each of the college housing areas actually have 2 days. We did it one day, and we got some feedback from students, not enough time, or they're working, or they have an exam or something that they have to take. So they have 2 days. They'll get an assigned lottery date and time. So just say like today at 4:05. And that's when it'll be open for them to go in. You're basically virtually picking a space. So in theory, you would pick within your College of Registration's housing community, and then you actually go in and pick the space that you want. So when I was talking a little bit about like those roommate groups and having lots of plans, same if you're going to be doing as an individual. I would recommend having 3 to 4 plans for yourself about like, this would be the ultimate one that I really want, but I can settle, for any of these choices. These would be options that I'm open to. So it's up to them to pick their own space. But again, depending on your lottery time, it will depend on what's left in the inventory for them.
As a follow-up to that, there's many questions from family members asking if students are allowed to pick buildings that are in different colleges than they are in.
No. So the reason why we have the college system, the 8 colleges, is to take, kind of somewhat of a giant university and drill it down to what we would call like smaller neighborhoods, essentially. And so the idea is that you're immersed within like Revelle or Mirror, and you're meeting people, although your degree can vary no matter what college you're in. I could be taking construction management and be part of Mirror. You could be taking construction management and be part of Revelle. But the idea is to boil it down into these smaller neighborhoods. And I saw some of the questions. I think people are really looking for that newer housing area, which I totally get. But if you're in 8th College, you are assigned to 8th. If you're in Marshall, you're going to be assigned to the new Marshall area, Ridge Walk. So you will have access to pick a room within your college registration's housing communities.
And lastly on this is, how does that work with students who want to live with other roommates who aren't in the same college?
That's the unfortunate part of the college system, I'll say. We don't have enough spaces, I'll say, to do that yet. I don't know if that's a future idea, but I've heard people talking. We'd like to somewhat be able to operate as off campus does, but we don't have that capability yet. So your friends would have to be the roommate groups that you're creating will have to be within your same college of registration.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that onslaught of a question that built upon a question.
No, it's great. It's great. I know it's a common question. I understand.
John Carlos, a family member or a parent asked, is there a way to not be liable for all of my students' roommates as a parent? And why would a landlord come to the roommates for individual unpaid bills as opposed to just reaching out to the delinquent roommate?
Thank you. Yeah, and the truth is that you can count on almost all circumstances the landlord absolutely seeking redress from every single tenant on that's signed on, and their attorney is going to tell them to do that because that is the whole point of joint and several liability. And again, that doesn't mean that say a roommate who was not at fault for not paying their rent can't take action against their roommate to try to get them to reimburse them or to pay up, that sort of a thing. But yes, it's absolutely common practice for a landlord to take legal action. In other words, for example, if one roommate doesn't pay their rent, their share, and so you've got an amount that's unpaid, a landlord has the right to file an eviction eventually. They have to, of course, go through a legal process to do that, but they don't just evict the one person who didn't pay the rent. They typically are advised and do go ahead and take legal action against everybody named on the lease. In terms of a landlord, or excuse me, a parent or guardian's financial responsibility or legal responsibility for their student and potentially for others living with them, that is the danger again when it comes to being a co-signer or guarantor. If you presumably one can try to talk the landlord into agreeing that the parent only be responsible for their student, but I've never heard of that happening. And adding, I suppose that one thing that could happen is that if a landlord is willing, multiple guarantors can be added. So every student that's living there can have a parent or guardian who's a co-signer. From a legal standpoint, that just means more people to sue. But maybe if that's a concern in terms of having one parent left holding the bag, I suppose that might be an option. Again, it's up to the landlord to decide and insist if they want a co-signer or not, and if so, how many. But I suppose that's a possibility. The only time I don't really see this is situations where a tenant is living with a landlord and has an individual lease, but those are obviously pretty rare. Thanks, Dan.
No, thank you for that insight. Malia, can a student keep the same room that they are presently in for this academic year through summer sessions, or will they have to move into a different room?
They'll have to move to different rooms. So summer session housing, it rotates around campus. And so for example, I don't remember where it was last year. I'm sorry, but Warren. So each housing community hosts summer and they all take turns. So last year, summer housing was at Warren. I don't think they published where summer housing is going to be this year. So if for example, you're at 8th College, I'm pretty sure that's not going to be a summer housing location. If you're going to take summer session classes, you do have to relocate to the summer session housing location. There is a way to essentially kind of bridge between your current space into your summer space, meaning you don't have to move all your stuff out and then come back again. You could just move from your current space to the summer session housing area. If you're attending summer session 1, let me say that.
If you great,
Yeah.
thank you. Okay, a couple of rapid fire questions as we're coming down to the wire here. If a student has accommodations for housing through the Office of Student and Disability Services, would they be able to have their guarantee extended to a 3rd or 4th year?
They have to do it annually. So in theory, you could. It's just up to the student to make sure that they're following through on making sure they get recertified every year. It's again up to the Office for Students with Disabilities to decide what kind of accommodation we're required to provide them. And so they meet with the student, they go through all the documentation. We have someone, her name's Yvonne Montano, who is our housing liaison, who works between us and OSD and receives the accommodation information. And then she works with her housing allocations team to make sure that we get everything for that student that is required. And so it is possible. I've definitely seen people that have been able to be here for all 4 years. I don't know what the condition was. So we just follow whatever OSD tells us. I want to really recommend for students, I see them trying to be brave, or they think that they can, maybe this is the year they're just going to do it on their own and they don't want to go through the accommodation process. I really, really want to urge our parents and supporters to have your students go through this so that they get the space and the accommodation needs that they really, really need to be successful here. College is stressful, period. UCSD is a global icon now, always in the top 10 of colleges. It's a rigorous academic schedule, and any help that your student support can get, I really want to urge them to sign up and get the accommodations that they need. But they would have to recertify annually. And the earlier the better, I want to say too, because the other thing is once spaces are kind of taken, then we have to wait for someone to move out. So let's just say they get an accommodation for a single, and they're all full. We have to wait for someone to cancel or terminate in order to give them that room because there's not a room open. So the earlier, the better that they can do it.
Great. No, thank you for that insight. Do second-year students who may be living in an apartment type unit on campus have to enroll in a dining plan?
It depends on where they're located, but yes, probably. The nice part about continuing a student's options is you have up to 6 plans to choose from instead of 3. There's a lot lower options available to our continuing students than what you would have seen as a new incoming student. But the only places that do not require a dining plan, and it's because there isn't a dining facility located close to them, would be the Rita Atkinson residences, Pepper Canyon West and Matthews apartments, and Pepper Canyon East.
No. Also, is the $450 deposit for continuing students, is that refundable if they were to change, their housing
mind.
situation later on and
Sure.
not return?
Yes. To a point, I'll say. So it's a increasing cost, I'll say. So once they've actually selected into a space, which is going to happen between April and May, if they choose to cancel at that point, it starts at $250. Then it's going to increase to $350, and then it increases. I'm looking around July up to the full $450.
Awesome. Thank you. And I know that we are at time. We are going to continue to answer questions offline, and so we'll stay in this space, even though the on-screen presentation may end, but we do have folks working very hard to answer these questions offline. Thank you, Jean Carlos and Malia, for both presenting and being here with us.
Thank you.
And I just want to share some closing notes as we wrap up our presented materials today. So this is a list of resources for everything that we have discussed tonight. And this will again be included along with the recording that will be emailed out to all registrants tomorrow. So don't worry about having to take a screenshot or try and copy all these email addresses or hyperlinks down. You will be able to access this document tomorrow. Something else is we've got lots of questions about the recording for this session. It will be available on our YouTube channel tomorrow, as well as being emailed out to all folks that were registered. If you would like to watch this YouTube recording or share it with a family member that would prefer to have translated subtitles to make it more accessible, YouTube has an option to do that, where if you select settings and subtitles, you can auto translate and pick your preferred language. And then this session will have translated subtitles over. Just another way to make sure that this is an accessible recording for folks and family members. Again, as I mentioned, we are going to leave this space open till the top of the hour as we work to answer as many questions as we can offline. If you have more questions following this session, please feel free to email us at parents@ucsd.edu, and we'll work with Student Legal Services, the Off-Campus Housing Office, and Housing, Dining, and Hospitality, the wonderful teams that help present this session today to get those questions answered. Thank you for taking time out of your morning, your day, your evening to join us, ask great questions, learn about everything that's coming up for your student if they are planning to return to live on campus or looking to live off campus for the next academic year. And as always, further supporting your student success here at UC San Diego. Again, in the future, if you would like to reach out to us or stay connected with us, our contact information for the Office of Parent and Family Programs is on the screen. Our social media is listed as well. And primarily that last social media, the /UCSD families is where all of our recordings for all of our Try and Family Web Series sessions live, including this one, which will be up about midday tomorrow, and it will also be emailed out to everyone who registered for this session. Again, we're going to stay on for about 10 more minutes as we work to answer many questions offline. But thank you so much for taking time to support your student and their continued success here at UC San Diego. And we'll see you next time for our next Try and Family Web Series session that will be taking place towards the end of the winter quarter in the middle of March. Thank you.